All right, welcome everybody to Build Week 2, the beginning of Build Week 2. Tonight's topic is going to be robot design and what you learn from prototyping. Questions you want to ask or things you want to share related to building our robot. Last week we talked about game strategy. If you have done some prototyping and that's changed your game strategy and you want to discuss that, that works for me. I don't have a set of questions or anything like that. Afomia, who led our discussion last week, had volunteered to lead the discussion again this week, and unfortunately she had something come up the last minute. So I want to continue what we did last week by having students do most of the talking tonight, but I also am lacking a facilitator. So students, if you want to move on to the next topic, by all means, jump in. I'm happy to let anyone here take the reins that wants to take the reins. We had such a fantastic meeting last week with our students doing most of the talking, so I strongly encourage that to continue. Also, I know that I say this occasionally, but if when you're talking and you feel comfortable to put your camera on, it's always great to see a face when you're talking to folks. And plus, it's really nice to be able to walk into a competition and see familiar faces from the roundtable. So if you're comfortable doing that, please do. So with that, who wants to start? Who's got a question or who wants to share prototyping or robot design things that they're thinking about? Riley, go right ahead.
It should be just a quick question, but we were looking at frame perimeter. Our thought was, what is stopping you from going to 30 by 30? Going to max frame perimeter. What's the advantage of being small this year? So that's kind of my question to you guys: is what is the advantage of going small, or should you just max out frame perimeter?
Sorry. One thing that we were talking about was thinking about whether two robots can be at the coral station at the same time. And that's dependent on how wide you are, as well as going between cages if you wanted to play defense. Thinking about whether if you're 30 by 30 with your bumpers, you're definitely going to hit some cages if they're deep. But if you're a little bit smaller, you might be able to get away with not causing too much swinging. Those were sort of the two instances that we were thinking about with our frame perimeter size.
If there's a lull, guys, if there's a lull, just hop right in. Don't have to worry about being called on. Emilio, go right ahead.
Yeah, all team were kind of going for a bigger frame perimeter, as we're kind of like going for an elevator design, and we want to keep our center of mass low. So we thought if we go for a big frame perimeter, we can just kind of keep that center of mass low to the ground, which is going to be important in a game that most teams are using elevators for.
Yeah, it's kind of the same processes as before. We have swerve, so just square size frame is usually the easiest for our programmers. We wanted to kind of get a larger acquisition area, but we were still worried about hitting cages. We just ended up about 28 by 28 for our frame.
Over at 2472, the kids decided to make it 26 by 30, partly because being able to get coral out of the station, and then also we'd be able to maybe drive our whole cart through the doors at the school without having to take the bumpers off all the time. So there was a secondary motivation behind that.
If nobody else has another question, I guess I'll move on to another one. Are you guys looking at doing a pickup from the front and then score with the same side of your robot, or doing more of a pickup from the back of your robot and then score to the front of your robot, so you're not constantly turning in circles? So I'm just interested to hear on your guys' take on that design too.
With the way that we ended up designing our elements, it's a little bit stranger than what most people have, but we're going to be intaking and then we'll be shooting out the side 90 degrees from us. So it wasn't really an active decision, more of unintentional of the mechanism, but we can see some advantages to having it at a 90-degree angle for some of them, but it's also a disadvantage for others.
I will share that KnightKrawler, the design team, as the plans that the students have come up with right now, is to do human loading from the back and scoring in the front so that the robot doesn't have to turn around during auto. There's some question of whether we are going to do ground pickup, and if we do, is it going to be in the front and the back? I think the last design that I saw was that there would be a handoff mechanism in the front and then score in the front if you're doing ground pickup. So take that for what it's worth. I think that leads into other questions about who's doing human player and who's doing ground pickup, but I want to stick with Riley's question before we move on.
The other thing is, if you're gonna do pickup in the front and score in the back, that also depends on how you secure your elevator frame too. If there's not an obstruction in the back, and some of that placement also we've been playing. We've never done elevator before, and so we're kind of looking at what's the best placement to have a better center of gravity, and not have to have a tall robot tip over. So it's kind of.
Hi, I have a question for everyone. I was kind of curious, what are teams focusing on this year? It seems like Coral is going to be a #1 choice, but I kind of want to hear people's thoughts on, one, what are you guys focusing on, and two, why?
Hi, I'm 7038, Tina Grace. And we are like mainly focusing on Coral because for us it's the most convenient and like for our robot. We're also trying to get an intake and outtake for algae. We are just focusing on getting an intake and outtake for Coral first. And we're not gonna do any of the net for the algae. We're just gonna focus on doing both the 35-degree angles on the I'm forgetting the name of it, but like the coral thing. I think you guys know what I'm talking about, and the tray.
I think it's important to note that anyone working on algae should make sure they read the team update that came out on Friday, as well as the blog post about the different types of algae that we're going to be seeing this season.
John, could you just summarize it for everybody? We've got plenty of time, and I think it's a very important thing to know.
Sure. Basically, first had approved one type of algae, and then the manufacturer used 2 different molds that resulted in 2 different versions of algae that have different patterns on them. One has curved lines, the other has straight lines. And the inflation and performance of the algae is a little bit different between the 2. They've changed the inflation spec, so the diameter is different than it was on kickoff day. So make sure you pay attention to that. And unfortunately, the algae that most teams ended up getting is not the algae that's going to be on the fields. So it may be difficult to get your prototyping and testing done with algae that you'll be seeing during competition.
John, I didn't see which algae is actually going to be on the field. Which one is it?
Straight lines.
Yeah.
So some more background information on that. I believe it was about 75% of the algae that was manufactured was not the type that will be used in competition, which is John's comment of most of the people who got algae got I don't want to say the wrong one, but not the competition version. I'll also share that we had, so in our area, in our hub, we found out that 2 or even 3 of the teams in our area purchased the 20-pack of balls. So there was a thing on Andy Mark where you could pre-buy 20 field elements before you even knew what they were. And all of those teams that did that got the correct version of the ball. And so we got the wrong ones in our kit of parts, but we've already gotten one, and we probably get another one from another team. Most of the people who got the 20 balls have realized we don't need 20 of these balls. There's no way we're going to pop these. And so if you ask around, if you find teams in your area that did that pre-Brypham Andy mark, they may have gotten the competition variant of the balls, and you may be able to get buy one or two of them from those teams.
Just as a note, 2530 from Rochester. I think we have 15 of the straight ones currently, and we would be willing to send some of those off if necessary.
I have a question on the two different types of balls. For the teams that have both, is there any like qualitative difference that you can see, or is it just like slight differences in like grippiness?
They are they changed the inflation specs. One of them's a little bit squishier than the other ball at the same diameter, and the competition ball is heavier. Now, whether it's a half a pound heavier, or 10 ounces heavier, or 3 ounces heavier, I can't really say, but you can tell it's a much more denser ball. Well, not much. You can tell the difference. You can tell the difference that, oh, this one's a little heavier. I don't know how much of a difference that's going to make for a robot. The big issue was how much you could squeeze it. One was more rigid than the other one. And I honestly don't remember which one was which. I do know that I talked to one of the mentors from Fire Bears, and he said that they have both kinds. They inflated them to the new spec. They held them up in the air, they dropped them, and they bounced to almost the exact same height again. That was not true before they changed the inflation spec, which is why I first changed that. They changed the inflation spec so they would have the same level of bounciness. So it's not bad. It really isn't that bad. Weight, it's a tiny little bit extra weight. They may be a little bit more, I don't know the right word. There was a video on Chief Delphi of one team pinching one ball and barely being able to pinch another ball. And so you could tell just how squishy they were.
David, just a quick follow-up to your previous question on what teams are focusing on. I think it really depends on the team's machining capabilities, their design and their machining capabilities. Some teams have limited machining capabilities, which will kind of dictate which direction they head. I would encourage you to try and stretch your imagination and, stretch your teammates, cause them to learn, and best of luck.
Yeah, from Team 3277, we're focusing heavily on the coral, and we're looking at trying to incorporate the center of a robot into some sort of deep cage hanging mechanism, because if you can get the deep cage, you pretty much have an RP unless both your teammates are dead, which would be really unfortunate. And then the coral, just because it's so abundant and it's going to be a central part of the gameplay, and then kind of putting off that algae to like if we have those two, we can probably build a mechanism to score the algae in the processor, and then not even thinking about trying to score it in the net. It's not worth the points to score it up there, and it's just difficult. That's our thought on it.
I have a general question.
I have everything off.
Okay, so FB sounds like has a feedback issue on the mic. If you get that straightened out, come on back. Mark, did you have something you wanted to say? Was that you? No, it was Dr. B. Dr. B, you were saying something? FB, if you want to just post your comment in the chat, then I can read it off to everybody too, and that way the YouTube folks will be able to see it as well. So I'm curious, while we're waiting for FB to post his question here, show of hands, how many people are going to try to do the deep cage? Oh yeah, we should have done thumbs up, then we could have watched them flow by. But it looks like a lot of people are looking at the Looks like a lot of people are looking at the deep cage.
I mean, we toyed around with both, but my kids wanted to do primarily algae and defense, and that they just stuck on that. And so, but I told them, I said, well, if you're gonna do that, then we're gonna have to do 2 subsystems just as a backup because we don't have a lot of machining capabilities. We just bought a CNC, but my kids they don't have that much experience of bouncing back. I mean, they're resilient, but I said, if you're gonna do algae, build something for a coral just in case we have a break, and then you got a backup plan. And I just stuck up a creek without a paddle, that thing. And they want to play defense and focus on algae. And so, well, if you're gonna focus on defense and algae, since there's fewer algae game pieces, then your next route of making yourself valuable is designing a robot that will target a deep cage, because like Adam Briley said, just you successfully land that, and as long one of your robots is in park, you get that ranking point. And so
Are there any other teams that's main focus, their number one pick is algae? Team 7850 is their first choice. We are doing algae. I'm just kind of curious.
And one other thing with the algae, what my kids were talking about is if you manage to put a bunch of that, the fat into the processor, that give the human player something to also, you can do a double take on that. And if you have a kid who actually knows how to throw the ball in the air and not under pressure, fortunately we have one kid who plays basketball, and so he's really looking forward to. I have a dad that's making a field element on that, so he can practice as much of that. I don't know how much pressure we can put on for him to actually feel something, or maybe like make a lot of noise. I don't know, but he's actually looking forward to it.
So when you're feeding into the processor, you're actually feeding to the other team, not to your player.
Oh, that's what. See, I knew I was missing something there.
Yeah,
that's gonna be a disappointment tomorrow.
David, when you say that you're focusing, David, when you say you're focusing algae, are you planning to score in the net from the robot?
Yes. By the way, that's Dave. I'm Jordan.
Oh, Jordan. Okay.
No, it says Dave. We're on the same camera right now. Yes, the team is planning on scoring into the net. The team's plan is, the idea with doing algae was we could kind of free up the coral stations, help increase other teams' time while slowing down the opposing alliance's time. So yes, our team is planning on being able to shoot into the net, preferably from low. We've got some good concepts for that.
I'll share that, KnightKrawler. I've seen a SketchUp for an algae scorer, but it needs to pick it up off the ground. So the idea would be that either us or someone else would just simply descore the algae and it would roll around, and then eventually you'd run over there and pick it up and score it in the processor. No one on our team has discussed shooting it into the net, and I suspect none of the students will prioritize that high enough to get to it this year.
The question that Finn was trying to ask before he got feedback was if teams are attempting shallow climb at all, either as like a backup or as just their primary endgame mechanism.
We at 2502 are not planning on attempting any shallow climbs. We are planning a deep climb, but we have no other alternative for a shallow if we mess up or say lose something.
I think that we are planning to do a deep climb, and if that does not work, we can also do the shallow climb.
3926, we're doing the opposite. We're focusing on the first on the shallow, but hoping to move on to be able to do deep. So we're looking at both, but we're focusing first on the shallow.
Yeah, I'm 2181. I was hoping that there was a shrug emoji instead of a thumbs up for the deep climb, because we're trying to make room in our robot architecture. We'd rather get the 3 points for winning. That's our primary, goal. And the 1 point ranking point for climbing is a bonus. So we're kind of focusing on the game piece scoring and then thinking about the cage. I think no matter what, we will definitely have a shallow climb. We just haven't. I've seen some deep climb thoughts, but every single one, it takes at least about 12 inches into your robot. Like you need at least 12 inches width-wise to get the cage into your robot, to get the center of mass like moved in. I don't know if anybody understands what I'm trying to say, but reserving that at least 12 inches of room is hard, at least the way that we're thinking about the rest of our robot right now. So for sure, shallow, maybe deep if a miracle happens there. I don't know if we can do some more work. So
can't you from the the alliance can request all 3 cages to be shallow, right? And so if pretty much hypothetically speaking, if everyone got a shot at the shallow cage, that should still be a good variety for the bunch. I mean, and also a question for the group: if the chain touches any part of your robot in that effort, when it stops, while you're climbing and it touches, that doesn't count until the time stops, right?
This is just me. My understanding is that if you're using the chain to help guide, if the chain is an integral part of your climb, even if it's not touching at the end, it still is against the rules. That's my reading of the rules. I don't know if that's true or not, but if you're using you know what I mean? Like, even if it's not touching the chain at the end, but the chain is important for lining up and doing certain things, I think you get dinged. But I don't know that. I don't know that for a fact.
Yeah, G419 says you can't touch the anchors except for actions that are momentary and inconsequential. So, like, if you do it strategically, you're gonna get a major foul.
There was a question on the Q&A about this as well, with somebody asking if they touched the chain every time they climbed, but it was momentary. So implying that it was a part of their climbing mechanism, but was just a momentary contact, if they would be tagged for a major foul repeatedly. So you might go to the Q&A and see the answer on that. If you're not familiar with the first Q&A, that's a great place to see rule clarifications, and this one was asked.
Has anyone made a cage yet with Schedule 40 pipe and sheet metal top and bottom? Jeremy, can you share with us how heavy that thing is?
We didn't weigh it specifically, but like 20 pounds, give or take.
It's heavy.
It's heavy.
We got an official cage, and I think we weighed it at 16 and 16.6, I believe.
Okay, well, yeah, that sounds right. With the chain and everything and the carabiners, it's heavy.
Yeah, if you smack into that thing, you're gonna regret it. I think I went and bought the pipe, and just the pipe alone, without the top and bottom, it was surprising how heavy it's going to be. You smack into that thing. I made the joke that we're going to have bumpers on the bottom of our robot and the top of our robot, because hitting that cage is.
Well, also an algae, a random algae flying. Like if someone shoots an algae and it misses, and that smacks the side of your elevator, like that could also do some damage. So.
I have a question. Has anyone designed something to prevent your robot from getting damaged from cages and stuff when you climb, or in general?
We've designed a polycarbonate sheet that will cover our electronics panel. And it's just kind of a way to stop things from hitting it. And then the electronics panel behind it is distanced quite a bit, so it can actually absorb some of that shock. Other than that, though, we have nothing else.
We're going to break something into week 0 and then think of a solution. I'm pretty sure that's what's going to happen for us.
I think it'll be curious to see how many matches a robot actually crosses the center line. I mean, there's always a robot who are like, oh, we're broke, we got to go play defense, and it's going to happen because of that. But it'll be interesting to see in a match play where their robot does exactly what they expected it to do, like something didn't break. How many people will choose to cross the line anyway? Especially with 2 human loading player stations, defense is going to be tricky. I don't know. We had some of this conversation last week about how important defense is going to be, but our general philosophy is to stay away from the cage until the end. I think that's going to be the way that we run.
7038 kind of just said that we thought it was going to be pretty unlikely that they came to our side, so we didn't really think about defense all that much. But you bring up a good point about how if a robot breaks, then they would come to our side as defense.
I will say 7850's defense is kind of a crucial part of our strategy. Being kind of an algae bot, going in over and getting those points and those algae from the other side of the field are going to be very important to our team. So we kind of part of our plan is to be in there, be causing mayhem, slowing down their cycle times.
Yeah, I'm excited to see a robot who helps their alliance process like 15 of the 18 algae on one side, and that poor human player what they're going to do.
So on that, I read something, and I'm kind of curious on what you guys take in this, but I read that like when you're scoring in your processor, you can only have up to 4 in there at a time. So if that gets full and that team just decides that they're not going to move those, you're kind of like stuck scoring in that processor. Like you can't score it anymore. Is kind of what I took on that.
No.
The team update 2 came out on Friday, and it said you can't do that. You have to be able to allow the other team to score. But let me throw another wrench into that. What about scoring in the net? All the algae won't fit in the net. You get 9 of them; they won't all fit.
You can actually get 2 wide in the net.
Yeah.
So
it's going to be tricky.
Yes,
but
yes, if you place them carefully, you could get them in the net. But by throwing them up there, do you think they're all going to fit?
There's actually a video of somebody doing human player doing shots, having quite a few in there out there. I can't remember where it was. Probably Cheap Delphi or something.
Yeah, I had found a YouTube video. I can put it in chat if people are interested. I think Arden just did as well. A human player comfortably got 8 of them standing in their their processor area, and there's plenty of space to put more up there.
So the human player on that side has to be making a reasonable effort to return those algae to the field. That doesn't specify whether that has to be a shot into the net or just a return dump into the field without a shot. But they have to be making a reasonable effort. So that's going to be really discretionary on the part of the refs. And I don't know about you guys, but I don't see them calling a human player who's struggling to keep up and clear the processor. I don't see them flagging that as a foul if they're if there's a deliberate strategy to overwhelm that, which some have proposed. I think that that'll be interesting to see how that plays out, but we'll see. But that was another thing answered in the Q&A.
I do have a question. How many teams are planning on throwing algae up into the net? Because I know we talked about it, but we couldn't figure out a way to do it consistently, so we decided against it. But I'm wondering how many teams did.
And also, when you say throwing, you're talking about the robot shooting into the net, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So our team's current plan is to do less of a throw and more of a gentle toss. If we can raise our elevator and our intake/extake mechanism high enough up, we shouldn't need to shoot it far.
We borrowed the Bison Robotics algae claw. It's kind of C-shaped with a tail at the end. And hypothetically, that can kind of just spit them into the net. We're not prioritizing algae in the net at all, but it's a bonus. We'd prefer to be flexible, If it's coming down later in the match and we have the RP for coral and there's I don't know, we just want it to be an option. So that is possible with the design, at least that we're thinking about right now. It would have to go all the way up on the elevator, which is high, but I can do it.
That brings up one more question that I had was my team 7038 went between a claw and an elevator for a bit, and I'm kind of curious like what other people decided, claw, elevator, and stuff like that, and intake from ground, because that was one of the biggest struggles we came up with.
Also, when you say claw, do you mean like an arm elevator?
Yeah.
Arm versus elevator?
Like yeah, like an arm.
Well, as long as I got my mic on, I'll share that we are planning on an elevator that has a short arm on it.
So we talked about using an arm before we got an elevator and picking off the ground. I think it was our second year that really gave us so much trouble trying to pick things off the ground, because if you don't just hit just right, or somebody hits you while you just keep damaging that claw. And so we just decided we are not going through that nightmare again this year, to say what's the case is there's someone bumping you or you're hitting the ground hard enough and then you damage your mechanism.
I did some CAD for like an elevator or a like arm, and what I found when I was like drawing out the arms was that like the geometry was like a little weird. Like it was difficult to like draw an arm that could pick up from the ground and also score on like the reef, but also like the arm, like I saw some videos and robots with the arms, like sometimes the arm would get like a little unstable, especially if it was like a really long arm. And I noticed like some of my drawings, the arms just like too long, and I just feel like it'd be really unstable. And then I did like a CAD drawing. Oh yeah, these are 2D drawings, by the way. I'm not good at CAD, but I did a 2D drawing of a elevator, and the geometry looked a lot better, and I felt like the elevator would be more like stable than the arm when scoring. So
Yeah, I will say historically, if you're in games where you only have to have vertical extension, like 2019, elevators are much more efficient than arms. A game like 2023 is much more suited to an arm because you need both vertical and horizontal extension.
Touching on that, as soon as we saw the game release, then a couple nights before, I'd been watching some behind the bumpers of past seasons, and immediately I kind of wanted to do 2054, the Cheesy Poofs, their robot from 2 years ago, 2023. It's an elevator, and then it has a linear slide for their claw, and I'm like, if you cut out the linear slide, you have a perfect robot right there. So we were looking at that. Elevator seems to just be so fast at the up and down movements, so you don't have to spend so much time being at your max extension and having your center of gravity so high. So that's kind of our thought on it. I have seen like two successful robot in 3 days that did arms, and they looked pretty good. So I mean, I feel like you could do it both ways. You just got to find the right build for your robot.
Yeah, we did one elevator, and that's pretty much the only degree of freedom that we really have, the only really moving part on a robot. We just found that arms in our past, how we usually build them, they always end up being pretty unreliable, having a lot of backlash and losing position easily. So we thought just having one elevator that slides would be a lot more precise for our team.
I was also thinking about how like for an arm you have to like go forwards and like backwards and gauge your distance from the reef if you're planning to score a coral in there. And I just think that with an elevator you could do like less of gauging how far you are away from the reef and more like just lining up and scoring quicker. So I don't know.
Question for the programmers in the room. Are you able to, and for the benefit of anyone who's thinking about using ARM, are you able to do like set points for ARM, in programming easily versus, because that's one way you can alleviate that is you do a, set point and like, automate the system.
Yeah, the best way to do that is either by using like touch sensors that you touch along the way as you're going, or if you're good enough or your motors are accurate enough where you can use their internal encoders or external encoders. Like if you have Falcons, they have a internal encoder and you can use that. We've had varying degrees of success, but we're definitely looking at trying to go more in depth with those this year.
Yeah, a string potentiometer is also a great way to measure how far up your arm is. You attach it low on the robot, you attach the string onto the arm, and as it goes up, it pulls it out, and that gives you an absolute position for that arm every time.
Yeah, the key thing that John said was absolute there. If your robot has an issue or something and you have to restart it or reboot the Robo-Rio partway through your match, your arm is not in its default position. Having an absolute encoder, whether that's a string potentiometer or an absolute encoder, it'll always read the correct value wherever your arm is located when you were to boot your robot.
I have a question for teams that are designing things that stick out beyond their frame parameter. I'm feeling a lot more comfortable this year with this game, that I'm less likely to get a penalty for sticking part of my robot into some other team's robot, because I don't think there's going to be a lot of interaction across the field. And I'm also not anticipating a lot of damage to the robot. Like last couple of years, we've taken a ton of damage on a robot. I'm feeling pretty good this year about this game in terms of not taking damage. I assume that was intentional on first part. Does anyone else find themselves thinking differently about how they're designing their mechanism because they're not as afraid of damage as they were last year?
Yeah, so for us, we were thinking about how things that might either be sticking out or things that might be a little bit more unstable or might be more fragile if we got hit. We were thinking about how it might not be as like such as an arm, that it might not be as big of a deal as last year. So like if we got hit this year, which is less likely, so it would be more okay to have something less stable.
Well, the nice thing about this year is you're not forced to run from one side of the field to the other. So you're not going to have those full field crashes where one robot's got a full head of steam coming from the other side of the field. So you can somewhat adjust your robots to not have to do those high-speed crashes. But what I am thinking of there is going to be a lot of this year with elevators is tipped over robots and designing your elevator so that you have some ballast on the other side of your robot that you're not tipping over as much.
Kind of adding to that, how are teams feeling with having this and their reduced weight limit for this year? Are teams finding success coping with that and working around that?
Ask us when our robot's built. And we're Swiss cheesing. I don't know. I don't love that they reduced it by 5-ish, maybe 10 pounds, but it is what it is.
I will share that my concern is more about, we can just add on a simple mechanism to pick an algae up off the ground and drive it over the processor. That'll just hinge off the frame. And, we could just add this thing here to do ground pickup for coral. And then pretty soon you've added so many things onto the side of your robot. Weight's a big problem. So my concern about weight is more that being that you have to get so high up in the air if you want to do high coral scoring, that sort of mandates that if you also want to do stuff on the ground, you have to add more mechanisms close to the ground. And that's where my concern for weight comes in, is that if you want to do stuff both up high and do stuff down low, now you got to start worrying about weight.
See, on Saturday we had like 3 hours of discussion before we did anything else. Part of that was that whole weight thing and center of gravity and trying to attempt for the deep cage, because one of my kids is amazing. That he was thinking about something for the deep cage, and his idea was actually very similar to what Penn State did. But to do that, you have to leave space in the middle of your robot, and then you have to have your center of gravity very close. And so, I told, when are we going to start building? I'm like, we're not touching anything until you know what you're building, because, cutting things and placing things. Part of the thing I tried to tell them on Saturday was, if you, with this game, you really want, it's not one of those things where I think that, oh, I will add this on later on. Oh, I will add that part on later on. We'll figure it out our climate, our end game later on. And part of that, we've done that for the last 3 years, and it hasn't really paid off on our team. And I just told them, it's like, part of the reason why you make mistakes is to learn from them. And we've made that same mistake 3 years, and it hasn't really paid off very well. So maybe year 4, we should be able to learn from that. And so, and that's kind of the route we're going, is making sure that all of our mechanism and design processes are in line with what our main goals are for this game before we start building anything.
Well, coming from a team whose robots historically weighed about 124.95 pounds, the last 2 seasons, I have made it my goal for them to keep weight in mind when they design their robot. And the last 2 years, we have been, when we went out to Colorado last year, I think our robot weighed 114. So that weight has been an issue for us the last few years. So we have really worked on that and figured out ways to design things strong yet light.
I have a question. Well, is there? I have a question going off of weight. Our team has historically, or at least I've been on the team for 2 years now, we have not been able to weigh our robot. We don't have a good enough scale at our school. What do your teams use to weigh your robot? Like a lug scale, or?
We use the stuff that you use for your luggage, and just put, hang it up on top of the. We have a beam that runs across, and just, hang your robot off of that. It will tell you for the most part.
Yeah, we got a scale with a head on a cord off Amazon. It was under $100, and then just built a platform that captured the top of the scale and sat off the floor so that the robot could fully sit on that platform. So overall, really cheap, and it's proven to be pretty accurate. We've been using it for probably 10 years now.
We've actually gone to the wrestling locker room before and like wheeled out there. They have like a big scale that actually does fit a robot. So that's an idea. If you don't want to get a scale, otherwise you should ask us. I think we have extras, so I'll keep it in mind. We have some that like the number comes off as a separate cord. I'll make a note and see if we have one. I'm pretty sure we have like 3 that we could give you one.
Yeah, same. I'd make friends with the wrestling folks and see if they're looking to upgrade theirs in the future, and say if you have an old one you don't want anymore. I don't know how often they have to pay to calibrate them, but essentially they had one that they thought wasn't working. They just gave it to us because essentially the power adapter died, so we just replaced that and good to go.
If we're willing to draw the topic away from weight for a little bit, speaking of climbers and people who are doing the deep climb, I'm interested to hear how many are trying to push the cage through their robot and how many are trying to like do the arm curl method that they showed on the game release for this year. Personally, we're trying to do like Jeremiah said, like Penn State, where they're kind of pushing it to the floor of their robot to get that little bit of height off the ground. But we've also seen some robot in 3 days where they just kind of have a little arm off the side of their robot with 2 prongs, and they just curl it up into their robot. So I'm kind of curious on what different teams are doing on that.
See, Bradley, and I like that stuff off the side. I thought it was easy mechanism. You just add on, but every one of the robots that I watched, and I think Scott, I did send you a text message about that, the chain. Most of the time, they end up just hitting that chain. And I'm like, at what point is it becomes a penalty? And, at what point are you not going to be touching that chain? Is it worth, the risk and going that route? With the Penn State, they had like that corral thing where it's stop the cage from rattling back and forth, and then you were able to line yourself up and execute.
Our team's planning on doing the donut bot where we have a hole in the center of our robot. Less for packing ability because it's not going to pack well at all. It's more for repeatability. The ARM designs we've seen take really skilled maneuverability from the driver versus Penn State's. You kind of just drive into it. The funnel puts it in the right spot, and you hit go.
I will caution everyone to make sure you understand the bumper rules. And, with the deep cage only being a couple inches off the ground, you will be hitting your bumpers with that cage first. So you have to make sure you can get it up and over those bumpers and into the robot if you're going to go that route.
And make sure there's nothing in there that can easily be hit and damaged.
So our team is trying to do something a little bit different. We were using pneumatic pistons to jack up our robot 2 inches. And then we're going to have pins shoot out, which will hold the cage from the bottom, and then we'll bring up our jacks, and then it should leave us about 2 inches off the ground.
Are those jacks touching the ground when they push you up?
Yeah, or they're basically half an inch off the floor, and then we have a 2.5 inch stroke length.
Okay, so you'll want to make sure you pay attention to the bumper rules, because when those jacks are extended, they will raise your bumpers up outside of the zone potentially. If your bumpers are outside the bumper zone, that will be a problem.
Yeah, so the max that the bumpers can be away is 2.5 inches, and so we'll be pretty close to that with 2.25.
I'll share that the KnightKrawler students so far are testing and off the side of the frame, doing the arm curl thing that Bradley had mentioned. That's what has been tested so far.
I think the Centurions are looking at something very similar to be able to wind up turn that cage more horizontal and pull themselves up.
I'm curious if you guys could give a thumbs up or thumbs down. How many people are planning to score on L4 top level for the Coral? So for the folks on YouTube that might be just listening, that was a lot of thumbs up and a couple of thumbs downs. Did anybody, has any team gone through their simulation or whatever you do to analyze the game and have decided we are absolutely not going to do this thing in the game? You've decided that this is not worth it, and you've taken it off the list to simplify a mechanism or something your robot's going to do?
I can share at this time 24/7-2 is not looking at picking up things off of the ground to score, but relying on the Coral Station.
We kind of decided we're not going to do L4 because we're trying to, keep our center of gravity lower and not have to build a very tall structure. Plus, also, we don't have a good programming system on our team, and so being able to automate that just so you can hit that just right to be able, you don't want to spend too much time, fixing yourself, positioning yourself to score one coral when you could have scored, 2 other game pieces, on an L3 or L2.
I believe the only thing we've definitively ruled out on 2530 is scoring the algae into the net from your robot.
3277 kind of had the same thought process, and kind of the opposite of this. We were looking at if there's robots coming up to pick up from the human player station, there's going to be coral dropped at some point, and definitely keeping in mind some sort of plan to clear those coral out of there, because 4 inches is a lot of separation between you and the human player station.
As a follow-up to that comment, I'd love to know how many people are thinking they need to have a coral floor intake versus just focusing on the human player station, because that for sure has been something we've been debating on 2530.
We are focusing on human player, mainly on 7038. I am curious though if anyone is picking up from ground, because we could not figure out a consistent way to do that. So yeah.
You should check out the ref starter bot. They have a really good I think intuitive mechanism for picking off the ground without taking too much space up inside of your robot. And you just pick up and go to the processor and get rid of it there. And I think also U of M also had a good one too for doing that too. So yeah.
I think they were referencing coral, Jeremiah, the PVC.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. No, yeah. I think if there's only one human player station, and if there was a world where the processor was one of the human player stations, and there was only one place to pick up coral, I think we would think more about floor pickup for the PVC. I think with 2, and then it just adds a layer of complexity that we're just, I don't know if I agree with Elsa, I guess. Finding a consistent way to do that is maybe not within our team's resources, when we could spend more time, dialing in a perfect auto or something like that. I don't know, but we have to make resource choices, at least for our team. So we are not doing floor pickup of coral at all. At least that's the plan for now. Something should change.
With KnightKrawler, I have only seen one sketch that does floor pickup, but I think we're in agreement. The students are in agreement that they want to do primarily coral from the human loading station. But there is a general concern that the field is going to be flooded with coral and it's going to be hard to get around. I suspect there are going to be teams that's their strategy, is they're just going to flood the field with coral and try to get it as close as they can get it to the reef so the robot doesn't have to drive very far. And I think that's going to be a problem for other teams. So I have seen one sketch, and it's a handoff mechanism. So you pick it up off the ground and you hand it off to your elevator. I don't know how feasible that's going to be. That's the only thing I've seen our team do. But we've had a lot of discussions around how important or not important that might end up being for a match. As a mentor who's been around for a while, I have fears of Steamworks, where you were trying to score the gears and there were a pile of gears right in front of the peg and you couldn't pick them up. You had to drive across the field to get more. In this game, you don't have to drive very far to get more. But I have fears of there being a whole bunch of coral in the way. So we'll see. I mean, I think the first week will tell us a lot. And maybe there'll be opportunity for teams to adapt depending on how things go that first week.
There was a robot from, I think, Blue Mountain State. Or is it?
Yep, I was going to say Big Sky Robotics, MS. Yeah. They have a very good floor intake. If you. What you're looking at, I have it open on my other monitor here. I'll put it in chat.
Yeah, their coral, it would seem like it would slip a little bit, but I think if you what could fix that is if you make the wheels. I think they were using 2 1/4-inch wheels in the back or something like that. If you make it a 3-inch wheel, I think with like the green wheel with more double with more compression, I think you can overcome that. But it seems really it worked in there. But let's realize here, right? The testing a robot with you're not on any pressure. You're just riding around picking things up, versus somebody on your tail, or versus that's the high stress during a match. It changes a whole lot of things too. But
I have a question. How many teams are doing a passive versus an active intake mechanism? I saw lots of different designs for RA3D. I'm just kind of curious what everyone's thinking about.
I'll share that KnightKrawler. I think the leading candidate right now for human intake is passive. So, and it's a chute basically that feeds down into a place where the elevator can pick it up. So I guess that is a handoff mechanism as well. If what I saw is what I think I saw. So I think that is intended to be a passive system. Obviously, the ground pickup would have to be active if they're able to pull that off.
3926 right now. We're looking at active mechanisms for getting coral from the coral station.
I have a question. So last year, we had more teams on our side, but the human player intake got crowded. Do you guys think that's going to be a problem this year, or do you think it's going to be less of a problem?
My instinctive reaction is you have two human players, both that have 60-inch or 80-inch human player stations that can each side can comfortably fit two robots. If it's getting congested, I think something's going wrong. Is my initial take on that.
Yeah, I kind of agree with what he's saying. At worst case, you're probably going to end up with, at worst case, you're going to have one human player station. If there's a robot over there that can play really good defense and they've blocked you off to one player station, but then you're looking at crescendo where you had one station, and I mean, it's one station works pretty good. So unless your game strategy, like Pranny was saying, was going really, really wrong, you should be able to make it work with two, or even if you have to, one.
Unless, of course, the coral and the algae are obstructing, which, I think that's the wild card, which is kind of fun and I'm sure purposeful, is like, where are these algae going to bounce? What are they going to hit? Are they going to damage you? Are they going to lodge in you? Same with the coral. It's that's the wild card, kind of fun and kind of annoying.
So talking about the loading station, are any teams worried about having another human player load coral into your robot without doing it correctly, or do you guys have a specific way, or you're just trying to broad as possible?
I'll speak up. Last year, we learned our lesson on 2530 that our human player was, here's the tendency. Human players watch their own robot. And so if you had a loader at the source last year that wasn't your team, they would not often see our bot coming for a feed, and would miss us, and we'd wait. And 2 or 3 seconds is critical. So I think that's an overlooked area of strategy, is having a very mindful and skilled feeder at your human player at the station that not only can service your robot, but that has eyes open to serve your alliance. And that's kind of a drive team training issue as well.
Yeah, and I'll just add on to that. You can feed an auto from the human player. Oh boy, it'd be preferable if it was on your team to get the timing right. We did some timing things, and I mean, you could get up to 4 or 5 if the person hits the timing right of loading the robot. But if they're not, then it's 2 or 3 in auto or something like that. So Yeah, especially in auto, as well as teleop. I felt the same way. Last year, we had multiple times a robot would pull up and then nobody would drop a note. Look down, please. Just look down. So hopefully with a taller robot, people are maybe we need like a sign on the top of a robot that says, please feed me or something. I don't know. But anyway, I think that's a great point.
I do think that, yeah, I agree that is a great question. And I think that goes to designing your intake to take account of the fact that you might not have your human player from your team there. And so you have to consider that when designing the intake from the Coral Station.
Yeah, easy to feed intakes and LEDs that notify teams like, hey, give me the coral or don't give me the coral till I'm lined up kind of thing are going to be key to making that easy.
And
it
for
might
the
not
students to be knowing what they need and when they're talking with their alliance mates and being able to articulate that easily so that it can be translated from person to person.
Honestly, this may sound like a joke, but it might not actually be a bad idea to put a sign in your robot that shows the orientation you want your coral.
So for FTC, they also have the human players like hand out specimens in like specific ways for autonomous, and it was pretty important for like the human player to know which way the each team wants their specimens like orientated, because if it's orientated a wrong way, the other team might not be able to score very well. So
One of you, I have a question about scoring coral on the opposite side of the reef from the driver's station. And what are people thinking about regarding visibility and using April tags, using vision, what you're going to do about scoring coral on the opposite side of the reef from the driver's station?
I'll speak up, Team 3277. We built our drive frame last week, and since we don't have our elevator here yet, we were messing around with that and lining up center to the April tag and offset to the April tag with Limelight, and we've got both of those centering and then offset. The hard part is if you do one first, you can't do the other because the April tag isn't going to be in the right spot. So looking at more on that, but it does seem like it's possible to do. I'm not sure on the accuracy yet, but that's something we're looking at.
My programmers, the KnightKrawler programmers, they are talking about lining up with April tags. My biggest concern here is that by week 6, I have a feeling the reef is going to be bent. And so even if you line up with the April tags, I'm concerned that it won't matter.
One thing that we on 2491 No Mythic have been thinking about, and that's posted on our Open Alliance, is using distance sensors to line up with the vertical pipes on the reef, because we realized by the time you're up against the reef, you're not going to be able to see the April tag on that face there. And so we have a set of 4 distance sensors on our robot to be able to detect the 2 vertical posts on the reef and line up, making sure that we're always in the same spot. And so I think there's more information on our Open Alliance about it. I'm not a programmer, so I don't know much about the sensors, but it's definitely an interesting use of sensors that we're thinking about doing.
Yeah, just as a note, 2530, we looked at that. We were very impressed by the ingenuity and creativity that you guys came up with there. We really liked the solution.
I have another question. How far are teams right now? So I know our team, we haven't quite got past the plywood phase. We're still prototyping. We're still getting through all of that. It's all very rudimentary. How far are teams? Like, do teams have a very concrete concept of what the robot's going to look like? Or are still teams prototyping? They're doing many different designs or what?
So
right now,
you can go.
sorry, you can go. My bad.
All right. So we just finished our master sketch and had our mentors review it. So the types of subsystems we have and like our frame constraints are all set in stone, but we haven't actually finished our CAD just yet.
We just started prototyping, so.
We have some ideas in mind, but we're waiting on parts. That's where we're at.
I would say we're mostly done with prototyping, and we've had our Crayola CAD design review, and that's pretty much as far as we are right now.
If everything's going according to our schedule, we are finishing up precise prototyping in the next couple of days and really diving deep into CAD for the next 2 or 3 weeks.
We have a
3926, we're just
drivable frame. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, Mark.
3926, we're just starting prototyping. Just barely.
2472 has their frame that's drivable, and the elevator parts just landed at my house this afternoon. So.
KnightKrawler probably has another. I hope it's not a full week of typing left to do. CAD will probably start in earnest. Well, it has been started in earnest, but it will continue for a while. And we have a drivable practice chassis that has all the parts we will use in our final robot, but we haven't started assembling the final frame and moving those parts over yet.
I'll just add. Go ahead.
That just reminded me, we did split our team into some parts. So we have a climb that we're working on that is about that's almost done. So we've just started testing it.
I was just going to add that 2530, this is the first year we've had space and materials to set up a half field or near half field, and we got our field elements, partially built, and so we set that up to walk the field and see what it felt like. And I don't know if you guys have seen the Advantage scope where you can do a virtual reality of the field, and so we kind of took our drive team through looking at the reef and walking around it and seeing what our visual obstructions were and all those kinds of things, which I don't think we've ever done that this early. And it was pretty eye-opening. So if you have that ability to even mock up a partial field, I would recommend it.
2181, we're doing WAD, wood aided design right now. That's what we're calling. We have a Frankenstein made out of plywood and 2x4s. But that's where we're at. Starting to CAD, thinking about CAD, but still in the wood phase.
I think for 8878, we're gonna set in our game strategy what we want our robot to look like. What we are stuck on. Well, I told the kids that I'm not CADing the robot this year if they want a CAD robot to build, because we've been talking about this for a while, the importance of CAD, because last year we built our robot from CAD and they just loved it, and we used less wastage. We had less wastage and all that. And so they were like, yeah, this is so cool, Miller. And I'm like, yeah, I know. Next year, you it. And so now they're like complaining and whining, and this is too. I'm like, well, it's up to you. You got your game plan. Let's execute. So let's see how the next 2 weeks go. I don't know. I know time is a valuable asset, but this is for them to learn. Maybe if you fan out the fire under their butt long enough, it might pay off. Who knows? I don't know. And I'm not good at CAD either because I'm always asking Scott.
Since it's quiet for a moment, I thought I'd just share that I think most of us from 2530 from last week, all the discussion that took place between all the different teams, we had pretty much covered a lot of those same things in-house, but it was maybe validating to see that the other teams were having kind of some of those same thoughts. And that way everybody is, it's reassuring to think that, to know that we're not, off target. And so I want to say thanks to everybody that shared last week also.
Oh, and the other thing following that, Jim, is because the last 3 years, since we've been around, I find myself struggling to get these kids to kind of get, own up to the game manual. They just want to get on and start building things. And I think this year, I had them take a game manual quiz. They did a worksheet. We did a Jeopardy. I'm like, and it was so fun sitting there yesterday listening to them. We can't do that. No, that is not acceptable. I'm like, yep. And so I think in the past, at this point, we have built something, but I don't think they really understood what they have built because we have done robot surgery. Almost every competition we've been at, and I told them we should not be doing robot surgery in our 4th year. We should be knowing exactly what what we're building. And if something breaks, you fix it. But not like, oh, you were over the bumper by this many inches, and so you got to cut your robot down, or those things should not be, And I told them, don't hinge it on me because I have a family and a career. This is this is your opportunity to be, ingenuity and to be intuitive, to be sharp. And so I think we are in a good place if I can get them past that whole bump with the cat thing, And what I'm asking for them, it doesn't even have to be a perfect cat. Just have something put together that is like a blueprint that you're following, so you're not, wasting a lot of aluminum and so forth.
I have a question for the students. I would love to get your perspective of what is the best and worst part of the prototyping phase.
I personally think the best part is like in prototyping is just CAD, like that early CAD of you're not making the whole robot, you're just making the part that you want to focus on. You don't really have to worry about all the little bolts or little specific things that you need in a full completed robot CAD. And you get to make just your own vision of what you want to create.
That's a good answer. I should probably clarify what maybe from from a satisfaction or an enjoyment point of view. I mean, I'm looking at this from the perspective of every team has different levels of engagement with their students when it comes to prototyping. Some people stand back and they just observe. Some people are elbow deep, and I'd really love to hear from the students on what it is that they like and dislike. Call it fun, call it satisfaction, whatever you want to call it. But I'd love to hear what your experience is with prototyping and what you think makes it good and not good.
My favorite part about prototyping is it's your first concrete look at something. It's not exactly what it's going to look like, but instead of going from these kind of, at least our team is really rough sketches that aren't really going to be representation of what the robot's going to look like, just basic stuff, to like having something there that you can hold and you can see how it picks up pieces. You can see how it's going to kind of work. That's really satisfying. And I think a lot of our team members kind of enjoy that part. My least favorite part is finding out a way to build it in the simplest materials possible. And our team always loses our half-inch sockets. I don't know where they go, but we can never find a place to put them, and they always go missing.
And the adapters to go to the drone.
Yeah.
I kind of agree with David, or not David, but David's camera. We kind of are in the same boat where it starts on the whiteboard. We don't have any mentors who are big into CAD, and I myself have tried a little bit, but haven't gotten really deep into it. So it's kind of that whole, here's this little 2D sketch on the whiteboard, and now it's in my hands, and I can see it's picking up the coral or whatever game piece I'm trying to have it pick up, and kind of seeing the intricacies of, like, if I grab it this way, it doesn't work kind of how I thought it would, or hey, this works in a completely different way, and this is awesome, and it'll work for our robot in 2 ways now. And then dislikes, I don't have a big idea for that. I know prototyping the building is kind of my best part. Maybe the dislike is the having to program it later.
I like looking at all the cool designs that people come up with, and I like having a prototype, like looking at a prototype. I think that's really neat. But I really hate discussion. Like, I know it's important, but I hate the goal setting part of like prototyping because it's really boring. I don't like sitting there, but I mean, it's important. So
Those are the days my 5-year-old does not go to robotic practice. He calls it talk.
I guess I'm not a student anymore, but when I was a student, I'm a very visual learner, so being able to see things happen was really important to me, to fully see how things interact. But an issue is that by trade, when I was on 2530, I was electrical programming, design, strategy, no mechanical skills whatsoever. So having a lot of ideas, but not being able to implement them in prototypes and being able to piece everything together is insanely frustrating.
One of my favorite parts about prototyping is having an idea and having everyone contribute to the idea to make a better idea.
Can I just add one more thing? I will say my favorite part about our robot this year was we stumbled on a solution. I don't know how many of you guys did the mini trials, where you had to pick up the beach balls. Yeah, we tested that intake for our algae. It's grabbed the coral so strong it snapped the plywood. We kind of stumbled upon that solution. That was such a satisfying feeling.
If there's a lull, I'd like to change the topic a little bit. This week we saw the introduction of Limelight 4s. Are teams looking at getting some for this year? I believe I saw a few smiles pop up, but what are you guys looking at for vision this year? Are you looking at Limelight 3s, 3Gs, 4s, Photon Vision? I kind of just want to get a scope of where people are going.
I think we've been using the Limelight 3s and the built-in software, and it's been working good for us. We used the auto generator for our swerve, and the 2025 version is different than the 2024 version, so a little bit of tweaking to get it to work, but we figured it out.
KnightKrawler last year used 2 orange pies with 4 global shutter cameras. And we also had a Pixie cam. So technically, I guess we had 5 cameras on our robot. We have the same programming captain this year. He loves the ability to have so many cameras, and it's very cost effective. So that is his plan again this year. Is we're going to run orange pies and global shutter cams. And honestly, because of the way you have to drive this year, I don't even think we're going to need as many cameras as we had last year, because you're not driving crazy paths around the field, especially in auto, and you're going to get pretty close to the April tags. So I think a simple camera solution is probably going to even work better this year than it has in previous years.
Last year we used 2 Limelights, 3 1960s, 2 Limelights, and this year I'm not sure if we're gonna do 1 Limelight or 2, but we were also thinking of getting the OV9281-110 camera. I think that's like a global shutter cam. I need to look at it again, but yeah.
Lily, I don't have the number memorized, but is it on Amazon?
No, it's from robotshop.com or Waveshare.
I don't know then. I was going to say it sounds like the camera we have, but we got ours off Amazon. Some brand that starts with an A, I think.
Yeah, I think it's AutoCam.
Yeah. Scott, did you buy a new one though for this year that had a better resolution or something, I think?
You know what? I think we did buy one. In fact, I think we bought a color one and we bought a higher resolution black and white one as well.
Yeah, I think Caleb had the higher resolution one on yesterday.
You know what? I
Over
think
the
you're
one-
right. I think I
Yeah.
remember him asking me in September to buy cameras. I think we did buy some a couple months ago.
I looked at it. It's like a Raspberry Pi, like global shutter.
Yeah, the nice thing about those cameras that talked with a ribbon cable, and I don't know exactly how that works with photon vision, but if you, with like OpenCV, if you connect the camera with the ribbon cable directly into the video part, the camera point on a Raspberry Pi, it can then use the video chip. Where if you connect a USB cam, I think it has to use the CPU to do video processing. I could be wrong about that, but if you've got a global shutter cam that connects directly to the Pi on the ribbon cable, that sounds awesome.
Scott, you're correct. My understanding is that as well. The one thing I will caveat with that is with photon vision, if you're doing 2 on a Pi 5 through the ribbon cable, my understanding is it doesn't like that well.
I have a question. Cameras are very important, but where you place them is also really important. Do you guys have any like keys or like strategies for proper camera placement? Because the team's done some before, and I feel like there are more efficient ways to do it.
I will say that my programmer announced at the end of the meeting on Saturday that they really liked having the camera down low. So they put the camera down low on our practice chassis. We set up QR codes at the height that they would be on the reef, and they were able to very clearly see the April tag from the loading station. That's what they said. I didn't see it, but I know that in previous year, in like last year, the April tag would kind of flicker in the camera, and whatever they did, whether it was placement or tuning camera, whatever they did, they said they had high level of confidence that they'd be able to see the tag the entire time from the loading station back to the reef.
I think. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
One thing that 2491 No Mythic does is we have custom 3D printed limelight mounts on our swerve drive. I know that's what we used last year, and those I think worked well. Again, I'm not a programmer, but those are helpful because they're down low on our drive frame and then pointed up maybe like 15 to 30 degrees, and so they have a pretty good field of view.
What 3926 did was we did like a little bit of trig so that we could line up our limelight to the April tag on the speaker, and then we also 3D printed some limelight mounts so that it would be in the right angle.
For those folks, I think using photon vision, I think this year also didn't we buy the calibration board, Scott? I think instead of trying to print it on the paper and make sure the paper was flat when we were trying to do the camera calibration.
Yeah. So was that a Chief Delphi post? Somebody posted on Chief Delphi. Someone is selling a limelight calibration board on Etsy, and I think
not limelight.
I'm sorry, a photon vision calibration board on Etsy, and we purchased one. We purchased the small one. It comes on a piece of, I think it might be 3/8 aluminum. It's a beast. You're not bending this thing, and it's a screen printed. Maybe it's painted with the calibration board, and it is my programmer. He loves it. He thinks it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. And so if you're doing photon vision and you struggle with calibration using a piece of paper last year, my program will tell you it was worth every penny you spent on it.
Yeah, we did the same. Honestly, it was like $30 or something like that to get it delivered. It was amazing.
I think it was like $20 and $10 shipping. Yeah,
Absolutely.
and it came very quickly too. I think we got ours within 4 days.
Did everybody use their voucher from Swift to get their free April tags from their kit of parts?
Have they arrived yet?
Ours have not arrived yet. But they're
ours.
free. They're $10.86 shipping, but otherwise they're free.
Yeah, so they won't come with the backing, right? So I'm kind of curious what they're going to end up being for the $200 value that if you wanted a second pair.
Yeah. David, do you have a plan on what you're going to put the stickers on? What you're going to use as a backing medium?
We have tons of polycarbon, aluminum sheet, and everything else. We'll figure out what is going to hold up the best, and we'll put them on those.
Yeah, I've been thinking the same thing. This actually might be a great project to teach some kids how to use the CNC to cut out backer plates with holes in the exact same spot, so that we can have a set of April tags we can use year after year. But we haven't identified the material that we're going to use yet.
Yeah, 4656 is using photon vision, and we're using the same pi. So it's important if you're going to use multiple cameras on one board that they're identical cameras and identical sensors, because the GPU gets confused. And Scott, you're right. If you use the ribbon, it goes through the GPU. And then last year we had challenges with the reflection of the polycarb of the tags, and I think the lower you went up, the lower you were more prone to reflection. So it depends which stadium you're in. And then the other one we found last year is if the camera, we had the camera perpendicular at the tags when we faced it, and you lose that three-dimensional view and it collapses to 2D, and our measurements went out. So we're offsetting by 10 degrees now, that whenever we face a tag, robot orientation is facing the tag, that we have like a 10 degrees so we can keep the 3D. Yeah.
All right. Well, it's 8:30. Any final last minute questions someone's been holding on to the very, very end here? Going once, going twice. Okay. So next week, our topic is going to be, I just had it up. Where did it go? Oh, come on. What browser? Here we go. I got the right browser now. Next week's topic is called Advocating for STEM, Engaging Policymakers Through First Outreach. And it is hosted by Team 2531, RoboHawks. So they're going to talk to us about engaging policymakers, and if your team is a team that works on the Impact Award, this is a great thing to add to your Impact Award, but it's a great thing to do in general anyway. I look forward to that. And the week after that, John are you still on the call, John? John Stratis from
yeah, I'm still here.
You want to give us a kind of a plug for your session last week in January?
Yeah, we'll be talking all about bumpers. We'll be going over all of the bumper rules, sort of line by line, since so much has changed. It really is, I think, the biggest change I've seen in robot rules since I started doing FIRST back in 2007.
I'm very much, John and I had a conversation over email about whether we thought this would take the full hour, and we have decided this will 100% take the full hour. There's a lot to talk about here with bumper rules, and I know a lot of some people have been doing a ton of research on where can I get this material, where can I get that material. We've had some talks on here, whether you want to go a mix of materials or go with a single material. So I'm excited to have this conversation. And for any teams that have already started thinking about bumpers, I'd love to hear what approaches you're taking. So we've got a busy January, or good sessions to finish out the January, and then all of our sessions in February are also full. However, March is completely open. So if anyone on here is interested in hosting a conversation in March, please go sign up so that I don't have to make something up on the fly. I'd really, really appreciate it. So great conversation tonight. Again, thank you, students. Thank you so much for participating. I really hope that this is a regular thing. We got some feedback last year that too many mentors were taking up too much of the time. I definitely appreciate that the students are taking up the bulk of our time on the roundtable, and I want that to continue. So thank you. Please encourage your friends to join with us tonight, and please come back. All right, we'll see you next week, and everyone have a very successful week 2 build.
Thanks for hosting, Scott.